The issue here, of course, is that there are certain things that are part and parcel of Islamic law or Sharia law that would be counter to our Judeo-Christian Western concepts of freedom and, for example, the treatment of women or the freedom of religion. So take one point in particular. The law of apostasy in Islam is such that if a Muslim decides to leave Islam and become a Christian or a Hindu or a Buddhist, whatever, or an atheist, whatever it may be, under the Islamic law, such people ought to be killed. And this again flies right in the face of our democratic values of freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of expression.
Well, the apostasy law has been much misunderstood in Islam. It became a standard law that the apostate should be put to death, and this was widely accepted in all of the major fiqh schools. But if one were to look carefully at the basis of that law, one would see that it's very shallow. There is no basis for it in the Quran. Quite the contrary. The Quran speaks about people embracing Islam, leaving it, toying with it, going back and forth. And if the Prophet Muhammad himself were killing people for doing any such thing, they wouldn't dare to do it in Medina, where the Prophet Muhammad had risen to power. So it is very clear from the Quranic evidence that there should have been no such law in Islam that the apostate should be killed. Moreover, chapter 2, verse 256 in the Quran says categorically there is no compulsion in religion. And if you force a person to remain a Muslim by threatening death if he were to dare to leave, then obviously you're contradicting the Quran. So Muslims have become comfortable in some ways in acting contrary to the Quran. They have enacted laws and made them popular, but that does not mean that that is definitive of what I would want Islam to be and what I consider to be the religion of God as taught in the Quran.
Now, what point do I have to go on to? Point number what? 9. The universal application of the laws of the Bible. So many countries, Japan, India, and all of that started applying the laws of the Bible. Folks, not every law. And we have agreed that some laws in the Bible really are from God. But you take a look at this one. See if really you would recommend this law today. This is from Deuteronomy chapter 13. In verse number 13, Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 13. If in any of the cities which the Lord your God gives you to dwell in, you hear it said that certain scoundrels have sprung up among you, and have led astray the inhabitants of their city to serve other gods whom you have not known, you must inquire carefully into the matter and investigate it thoroughly. If you find that it is true and an established fact that this abomination has been committed in your midst, you shall put the inhabitants of that city to the sword, dooming the city and all life that is in it, even its cattle, to the sword. Having heaped up all its spoils in the middle of its square, you shall burn the city with its spoils, as a whole burnt offering to the Lord your God. Let it be a heap of ruins forever, never to be rebuilt. You shall not retain anything that is doomed, that the blazing wrath of the Lord may die down, and he may show you mercy, and in his mercy for you may multiply you as he promised your fathers on oath, because you have heeded the voice of the Lord your God, keeping all his commandments which I enjoin on you today, doing what is right in his sight. Would you recommend that law, Smith, for any country today, whether Japan or India? You see, some of the Bible is the Word of God, and if you apply that, great. But just because some people apply the law doesn't prove it's the Word of God, because some people will not apply some other laws, like this one I just read out to you, and that doesn't prove that it's not the Word of God. It just proves that people do not want to apply it. There may be other reasons why you think that's not the Word of God. But whether people apply it or not doesn't make any difference for the Word of God. You're using there an ad populum appeal, which is a logical fallacy.
In fact, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights says that not only do we have the freedom of religion and expression, but it clearly says that the person has the freedom to change and convert from his religion to another without retribution. So the UN Declaration of Human Rights acknowledges the right to convert from one religion to another. Now, under Islam, that is not allowed. That is not possible.
Number 11, the United Nations documents on human rights, demanding freedom of thought. You say that the Quran doesn't agree with that, so therefore the Quran is not the Word of God. Well, if a document has to agree with the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, what would you say to Deuteronomy chapter 13, where it says that if anyone commits apostasy, you should kill that person, you should stone that person to death. And it says furthermore, if your brother, your sister, your wife, whoever, your closest ones, if they call you to worship someone else other than the God that you have known, you should be the first one to stone him to death. It says in verse 11, you shall stone him to death because he sought to lead you astray from the Lord your God. That, I'm sure, will not agree with the United Nations Declarations on Human Rights.